2024. Please note attendance has been taken. Noting Councillor Coleman's absence, I will be filling in as the chair of the meeting today, and that Councillor Kyle is online here. Can I get approval of the agenda? Mover and seconder, please. Mover, Councillor House. Seconder, Councillor McAlpine. Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Thank you. Any declaration of pecuniary interests for this evening? Seeing none, we'll move along to delegations. Please note to the delegations that you'll have 10 minutes to present. You'll be notified after 9 minutes have passed to give a remaining minute to wrap up, at which point we will move to questions from the committee. First on our list here, we have Chris McCurdy, who I believe here is online. You have 10 minutes.
Hello. Again, I'm Chris McCurdy, and Mayor Bailey, councillors and staff, thank you for providing the opportunity to speak on the draft climate action plan. Now, I recognize that the plan is to incorporate community feedback prior to approving on November 26th, but I just couldn't resist providing my early assessment of the plan. Before I share my thoughts, I wanted you to know that I'm uniquely capable of assessing the draft climate action plan based on my strong science and business background, by having held environmental leadership roles in industry, working for an organization that's recognized for its positive impact on global environmental issues, and because my personal interests have always included activities that positively impact the environment. In fact, I met some of you at the Nith Peninsula pop-up meeting in Paris and at the Burford Lions Cadman Park tree plant. So here's my thoughts. The draft climate action plan is excellent. It has clearly been well researched, included strong stakeholder input, and it's manageably broad in scope. Initially, I wanted to share what I thought were key highlights, but the report is just bursting with highlights and great content. So instead, I chose to mention the importance of change leadership on this critical plan. So to implement the climate action plan, we need to do things differently. We have to change the way we operate. We have to ramp up the good things the County of Brant is already doing. And we need to engage every organization and individual in this plan. This is not a single person or a single department job. This is truly everyone. The great news is the plan already contains change management elements like the need for senior leadership support, collaborating with businesses, community groups, and individuals, leveraging the ideas of corporation staff through internal workshops, empowering cross-division department working groups. These are great things. Supporting climate change learning opportunities, hiring a climate change coordinator to help all staff employ climate change lenses to goals and objectives. And it has goals and milestones. So these are all great change management tools, and I applaud the authors. Now, you already know what I'm about to say, but I really wanted to state it, is that change leadership starts with this group. And so I encourage this committee to continue to support the Climate Action Plan and to ensure the plan is resourced with the necessary staff and budget. And finally, I'm going to be quick. On behalf of my children and my grandchildren, who will be here to weather the storm, thank you for everything you've done to support the plan so far. Your actions will bring hope to the generations of County of Brant residents who will feel the full impact of climate change. That's all I had to say. And again, good work. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you, Chris. Any questions from committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Chris. What would committee like to do with this delegation? Councillor Pierce?
Move to receive, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Seconder? Councillor House? All those in favor? Opposed? Perfect. Moving on to 4.2, Chuck Beach.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor and Council, thank you for allowing me to present to you tonight, yet again, on a topic that I've touched on for the last 5 years. I'd like to share with you a few slides, some of which I've shared with you previously. So, according to NASA and the Goddard Institute, 22 of the 23 hottest years on record have occurred since the year 2002. I suspect when they include this year, it'll be 23. Something's happening. More frequent weather extremes happening all over the globe. I have a document here. It's called A Guide to Our Common Future, and it was the report of the World Commission on the Environment and Development, and it was commissioned by the UN. I'd just like to read a few things from it if I could. The evidence that nature cannot indefinitely sustain accelerating human demands is too compelling to ignore. Public attention has recently been focused as never before on global warming, stratospheric ozone depletion, pollution of the oceans, destruction of the tropical forests, and other environmental threats. This report, also called the Brundtland Report, because it was led by the former Prime Minister of Norway, Gro Brundtland, was written in 1986. We've had a few years, whatever. So, I've showed some of this before. Mexico is about to experience its highest temperature ever recorded as the death toll climbs. Temperatures soar to nearly 50 degrees across India in the ongoing heat wave, the third straight year. Balkan hits by blackouts as heat wave persists from June. Switzerland floods. 1 dead and search continues for others, June. The river level at the Amazon rainforest ports hit a 122-year low amid drought, October. Hurricane Helene updates, death toll surpasses 230, October. Hurricane Milton, nearly 1,000 people have been rescued so far, the Florida governor says, October. Spain hit by, this is just in the last few weeks, Spain hit by the deadliest floods in decades, October 29th. A dozen BC daily rainfall records fall as a staggering atmospheric river pounds the south coast, October. Now this is interesting, a little more local. Rainiest summer on record. Obviously by far. Waterloo region's hot September, the driest in more than 50 years. So we have a climate action plan. I would like to congratulate staff in particular. I think you've really captured the necessary sense of urgency. Thank you for including specific objectives and targets, the need for dedicated resources, and annual reporting to Council. I believe this draft lays the foundation for a comprehensive approach to the reality of climate change. Many of the proposed action plans referred to in this document are yet to be written. The action plan must be seen as a fluid document that will change with time and technological innovation. Am I totally happy with the draft action plan? Of course not. The answer is no. I will be sharing my comments with staff, but that's for another day. Think globally, act locally. I urge county councillors to engage and support this initiative and this outstanding work by staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck. Any questions from committee? Councilor Miller.
Just a quick comment there, Mr. Chair. Through to Chuck. Chuck, I appreciate the global examples you have. Some of the best weather data, climatic data locally, the GRCA keeps, and we were looking at a report last week on river ice, and they're showing the highest high temperatures, the coldest cold temperatures, but you could see this general graph going up over the last 50 years. So it is supported locally, what's going on.
Thanks, David.
Thank you very much for your presentation. How would committee like to handle the presentation? Mayor Bailey?
Proceed for information.
Seconder? Councillor Bell, all those in favor? All opposed? Perfect, thank you. Moving on to the adoption of the minutes from previous meetings. Can I get a mover? Councillor Pierce? Councillor Miller? Any comments, questions, concerns with the minutes from last meeting? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Perfect, carried. Any business arising from the minutes? Oh, Councillor Kyle.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to, I guess it might be a question for staff, but in the minutes from our policy development that we just passed, we had talked about chickens in residential areas, and that's a topic that came up at the Ag Advisory last week. Councillor Coleman and I were both there, and the committee had questions around whether or not they would be able to see whatever the plans are for that potential program that's coming forward. So I didn't know if staff could maybe comment on whether we could make sure that that goes back to the Ag Advisory before it comes to council or to committee for decision. And if not, I could make that motion if that was preferred. So just wondering what the process might be with that.
Do we have staff available to answer?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The General Manager of Development Services isn't here tonight, but I can certainly pass that on and make sure something goes back to Ag Advisory.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, we'll move on. First, 7.1.1, updated accessible design standards as a consent item to be approved. Do we have a mover? Councillor McAlpine, Councillor House, any comments, questions, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Moving on to consent items to be received. 7.2.1, Fire Master Plan Status Update. Can I get a mover? Mayor Bailey, Councillor Pierce, any questions? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to whoever wants to answer it on the other side. It's some time since we had this master plan developed. Things have changed in the county. Are there any issues that we did not recognise when we developed this plan that we need now to react to and change the plan accordingly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Bell. No, we've been going along with the Fire Master Plan quite well. It was laid out well when it was developed and delivered to us in 2021. And we're making some good progress with the recommendations.
Councillor Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I guess, to the chief. I guess it would be page, I guess, for section 4 under department staffing and program in the report there, where it talks about hire 3 career firefighters to provide day shift Monday to Friday. And it's got timeline shifted, and we had that in our short term, and now the timeline is shifted to the long term, 7 to 10 years. Do we feel that we can wait that long?
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Pierce. What we're doing is continuing to monitor call volume and the stress on firefighters when they're responding. When we open the North End Parish Station, call volume will cut in half, and that will bring it down to about 150 to 200 calls per station, which is in line with some of the other stations, which is manageable. What we will do is continue to monitor, and depending on growth with population as well as industry will help determine whether we go full time. Also, location of the station. If we were to, and part of the Fire Master Plan was to look at relocating the main station, so Station 1 out to Rest Acres Road, That would provide another opportunity to go full-time with daytime response, because they could cover some of the airport or Burford calls. If it's a minor call, like where you don't need full staffing, and it would be backfilled with volunteers still.
Okay, thanks for that.
Any other questions from committee? Seeing none. Did I get a move from somebody? Okay, perfect. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Moving on to staff reports. Item 8.1, draft strategic plan update. Can I get a mover and seconder? Councillor Pierce, Councillor Bell, and take it away, Adam. Thanks, Briar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of committee. I just have a very short PowerPoint presentation to outline the goals and objectives of the revised strategic plan. So obviously the strategic plan is an essential plan that outlines the vision, priorities, and goals of the county to guide county operations as it works to achieve the needs of the community. This is a process that has been about 5 years in the making. The last strategic plan, the current one, was approved in September 2019. So 5 years is quite a good time horizon for that. And we've made some revisions and adopted some new priorities based off the findings of the engagement with the community and council. And I think a realistic sort of time horizon for looking at either a new strategic plan or refreshing the current one would be about early 2027. We don't propose to change the vision. I think the vision is kind of key to keeping the main tenets of the original strategic plan, but while also working in sort of a refreshed environment. Just very briefly what we heard. So we had public engagement middle of last year. Some of the top themes were protecting the natural environment, issues about planning and development, certainly action on sustainability, energy management, climate change, focus on the downtown cores, and heritage. We held a session with council towards the end of May 2023 with Glenn Pothier, who was facilitating many of these community engagements as well. And some of the top themes that came out of that were the need for a long-term financial plan, sort of an equitable approach to decision-making for all residents, and concerns regarding affordable housing. And so ultimately, what you have in front of you, what you see, there's really no change or shift in the composition of the priorities. We've tried to combine a couple to streamline them and to highlight their importance working together. But just a sort of a slight change in the prioritization of the strategic priorities that I'll walk you through. So these are the 5 priorities as we've laid them out. The first one is financial and economic resilience. Second is focused growth and infrastructure. Third is healthy, safe, and engaged communities. The fourth remains the same, which is stable and responsive governance. And then we've added a fifth in recognition of Council's declaration of a climate emergency, just very briefly after the strategic plan was adopted, that focuses on environmental sustainability and climate action. So the first one is financial and economic resilience, and the goal is to utilize the long-term financial plan to ensure that decisions are made with a broad economic and financial understanding to support county operations in the county and the community at large. The second is focused growth and infrastructure, which is with a goal of, guided by the new official plan, ensure that planning for growth is undertaken in a manner that is proactive with the necessary infrastructure in place. Number 3, healthy and safe and engaged communities. The goal, ensure that the decision-making process is equitable to all residents in all communities and is communicated in an accountable and transparent manner. This one really focuses more generally on the community at large. The fourth is continue stable and responsive governance with the goal, ensure that the county has the financial, human, and physical resources required to deliver quality, reliable, accountable, and affordable public service. And the fifth one obviously has a large focus tonight, with a goal to advance climate change mitigation and adaptation to support a resilient, sustainable future for all. So the next steps as we see them, obviously you have the draft in front of you this evening. I'm happy to receive comments on that right now. We'd like to review those comments and make any revisions and present the finalized strategic plan by the end of 2024, with a time horizon in the spring of 2027. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Adam. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to be clear, Adam, we've got some time to review this.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. That's certainly, it's not something I want to drop in your lap and say, please, I think you should approve this. I think this is a chance for council to have some time to digest it, ask some questions, provide some comments. Whether we come into a situation, whether this needs to come back to an additional committee or whether there's a special meeting to formally review it. I think that's at the direction of committee and council currently, but certainly I think from our perspective it's in a good spot, but certainly we're here to listen to any comments.
Yeah, thank you. One question I would have is a bit like the question I asked of the fire chief. I mean, since we drafted this, and it's quite a while now since we drafted it, we did put it on ice for a while. Mm-hmm. Are there any significant events or trends that we now need to react to that we wouldn't have had to react to 18 months ago?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. No, I believe the last 18 months have really led to this. I see the completion of a lot of plans and studies. We have the adoption of the new official plan. I think the original intent of that strategic plan set the table for the implementation phase. So I think the reason that it kind of fits very well that we're bringing this refreshed strategic plan is to provide that guidance for a lot of these plans that are going to be either are finalized and adopted or will be finalized, over the next 2 years. I don't think, put it this way, we were kind of shocked to think that much of the community response that we got in 2019 in terms of prioritizing the community's needs and desires were very similar to 2023, that sort of public engagement that we received just 18 months ago. So I don't really have too many concerns that many things have really shifted. I think if anything, some things have gotten better, and we certainly have tried to prioritize the things we need to work on, like climate action and climate change.
Thank you. One comment I picked up from quite a number of people, and it's on social media quite a bit as well, is that there is a desire, at least in the parts of the community that use that channel, that this council focuses on meeting the needs of the community before it meets the unfunded wants of the community. Do you think that comes out strongly enough in here as a strategic direction?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think the reprioritization of number one for financial and economic resiliency is something I think we tried to highlight in terms of understanding some of the financial limitations the county's experienced. I think we, highlighted in the report, we've saw sort of a large levy increase this past year. We've seen increases to non-assessment growth from development charges. So, I think we recognize the costs have increased and therefore we need more revenue, but that has a downstream impact on the community at large. And I think the intent was to try and highlight the need for some pretty significant considerations towards financial resources. And I think coming to the implementation of the long-term financial plan, the operationalization of it will really help being able to provide how we fund the needs of the community. And then we can also still focus on those unmet needs as well.
Councillor Bell, I believe CAO Newton also has some insight to give.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I would just add that while the goals may not have been influenced as much by the last number of years. I think how we go about achieving them definitely will change. And so you'll see that in some of the, how do we know whether we're succeeding? How do we actually implement this? I think that's where we're going to see a bigger shift. And, I think we recognize also that while we may be talking about fundamentally what the community might need, the complexity of how we achieve those basic needs definitely has changed as we've grown and gotten bigger. So,
Councillor Pierce, and then Councillor Chambers.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. If I could just a comment through you to Adam. Thanks for this report, Adam. A couple things, I guess. It's good to see that, like you say, with the public engagement from 5 years ago to now, very similar views, which is good. Because that could have taken us in a different direction, which I think it kind of shows that we've kind of captured the essence of what the public has wanted. So that's a good thing. And just in the summaries and recommendations, and if I'm just going to read a couple lines of it. It says, as indicated above, many of the plans and projects identified as specific actions in the current county strategic plan have been completed or expected to be completed imminently. That sounds like it's fantastic. Everything is good. It's all done, and we're well on our way. I just want to be clear that as much as we have completed a lot of them, there's still a lot to do in this. I just wanted to just kind of reiterate the point that it's not something that's one and done here, and it's we're revisiting again, like you said, in the 5 years. But I just want to just point out there that as much as we've done a lot, there's still a lot to do, as they say, right? But again. It's a good report, and I like the way we're going, and thanks.
If I might, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Yeah, I think the general intent of that statement was to set the table, to say we council set a direction 5 years ago, and much of the planning work for that is being accomplished. Now it's the implementation, and truly, I think there was a vision set for the direction of the county back in 2019. I think very fortunately we see that the feelings of the community, have shifted, but not necessarily in massive ways. So that means that that council and the corporation can still work towards many of those priorities that were set in 2019, and continue to strengthen the county in that direction.
Well said. Thank you.
Councillor Chambers, and then Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask a question through you to Adam. It's a philosophical question, and perhaps some of the other department heads might want to assist Adam in answering this.
Appreciate that.
Already this evening we've talked about plans. We've talked about a climate action plan, a fire master plan, strategic plan, an official plan, an accessibility plan, a long-term financial plan, and we have all these plans. One of my favorite quotes is by Mike Tyson, the former heavyweight champion of the world, who said, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth. And Mike Tyson wasn't a brilliant man, but I think he had made a good point there.
I can see the point.
So my question is, I would think metaphorically speaking, a 10% increase in property taxes, followed by hopefully not another one, and preceded by an 8 or 9% probably tax increase. Metaphorically speaking, that's a punch in the mouth. So how does our increasing tax bills in terms of percentage increases affect all of these plans? Are we planning ourselves into something that we can't afford? That's my question. And remember that everybody has a plan until you get punched in the mouth.
Through Mr. Chair, I'll take a stab at it, and I think if any of my colleagues want to take a stab at that as well, I'd appreciate that. Well, I mean, you don't enter a fight without a plan. I think we've been punched in the face a couple of times very recently. And I think the resiliency of the county, I'll take my personal experience. I've been here 13 years. I understand that the general ethos of operating as a county staff employee is you do everything you need to do to get it done. And I think over the past decade or so, we have certainly seen the pressures of growth and what that's placed on the staff administration, what that's placed on the community, and what that's placed on council ultimately. I think there's a need for plans so that you know how you can get back up after you've been punched. And certainly COVID and inflation have been significant drivers of county operations. I won't speak more to the philosophical financial assessments and budgeting. That's not necessarily my purview, but I think at the end of the day, having something like a strategic plan allows you to focus on something like that. And I think that sort of general sense I took away from the council session, back in May of last year, was a need for a long-term financial plan so that we understand how the financial decisions that are being made impact all operations and the community at large, but also ensuring that we adapt to the future and adapt to the next 5 to 10 years as we've adapted to the previous 5 or 10 years. So I think that's the best way I can provide my comments on a philosophical question, but I'll also maybe look to the CAO if she has any comments as well.
Thank you, Adam. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I mean, every day, absolutely, we're having to look at a bit of a balancing act because there are things, even 5 years ago, let alone 10, where we weren't seriously contemplating a long-term financial plan. We weren't seriously contemplating the kind of infrastructure that we're putting in. We didn't anticipate the type of growth that we're seeing, at least not in the time frame that we're seeing it. And again, I'll talk about the complexities that come with all of that in the absence of any plan, because it wasn't something we had to really deal with. So it's this constant balancing of trying to deal with all of those things without putting us in a position where we can't afford them. So, a lot of competing priorities, and that's certainly, hopefully this will help prioritize some of those things and help us decide collectively whether we and what we should perhaps put off and what we can do today.
Is that sufficient, Councillor Chambers?
Just, I'll conclude by saying that respectfully, if with answers like that from staff, if you jumped into the ring with Mike Tyson, you would knock him out of the ring. Very well answered.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I need a little bit of latitude on this one because I'm going to overlap with 8.2, the next report on the climate action plan. Simply because the two are tied together. And I'm going to focus on priority 5, which is the new one, environmental sustainability and climate action. And this question, it could also be asked of Haley as well, but because Adam's up there first, I'm just going to ask Adam. And this new priority 5, environmental sustainability and climate action, Adam, relies heavily, according to your report, on the climate action plan. Yes. And when I read the climate action plan, to me, I see a serious shortcoming in the climate action plan, and maybe I'm expecting too much from it. And I'm wondering if we couldn't fix that shortcoming through the strategic plan. And I'll get to in a second. When I read 8.2, the climate action plan, I find it's very much focused on actions, things we can do, right? Insulate buildings, plant trees, and so forth. But I'm reading that, but I keep thinking about the Hippocratic Oath, and in it they say, do no harm, right? So while we're out there doing good things through our actions, what's not to say that there's other parts of staff or council decisions that are doing harm? In other words, we're increasing emissions. So while actions are good, we have to ensure the other actions aren't making the emissions worse. Mm-hmm. And I don't think you can do that unless everything you do is put under the climate change lens from start to finish. And you had a good line there in your presentations and the reports is we need an equitable approach to decision making. And I don't know, how do we get a climate action plan lens approach to decision making? I'd like to see that. And again, I don't know, do you put that in the carbon or the climate action plan, or do you put that in the strat plan? And I can give you lots of examples. We talk about making municipal buildings energy efficient. That's what the climate action plan says. I would step back. I'd say, first of all, we should look and say, do we even need the buildings in the first place? Or can remote work, variable work shifts eliminate the need for that building in the first place? They always say the cheapest energy dollar is the one you don't spend. So it emits the least amount of carbon dioxide. In Haley's report that comes in at 8.2, it says county staff adopt a climate change lens and consider the impacts of climate change when designing new infrastructure. Again, I would take that climate lens and I wouldn't apply it just to the new infrastructure when you're designing it. I would step back and say, well, let's use that at the decision-making stage. Do we need that infrastructure in the first place? Is it suitably located? Is it the best we can do from a climate action point of view? So I'm trying to get it all, like you say, get it into the decision-making process, because there's a lot, like I say, we can do to negate all the good things. One example, and I've harped on this before, is Cobblestone Sacred Heart School, where we put it so far back from Rest Acres Road that every parent dropping off their child, every school bus has to go down that street and then come back. We should have put it closer to Rest Acres. So what I'm saying is, not only do we need actions, but we've got to make sure the actions that we are doing aren't harming. And where do you think, Adam, is the best place to do that? Is that in the climate action plan, or can we do that through the strat plan?
Through you, Mr. Chair. My initial thought, it's a pretty significant thought, but I think there's probably room in both, to be quite honest with you. I think there's elements that would be better served in the climate action plan with certainly an element in the strategic plan, because if you're looking at a broader decision-making process change, there's no better place to do that than in the strategic plan to point to that. It is a corporate-wide document. Not to say the climate action plan isn't a corporate-wide document, but I don't think it resonate. Every little plan that we have, because we do have so many, resonates in the decision-making process and the recommendations of every member of staff. So I think those are sort of my initial thoughts on that. I'm happy to think a little bit deeper about a pretty significant question as well.
Just to follow up there, Mr. Chair. You're just looking for input tonight, so consider that.
Yeah, certainly. Duly noted.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. Any other questions? Seeing none, we have a mover and seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. All right, moving on to 8.2 Draft Climate Action Plan. Haley. Can I get a mover and seconder? Councillor House. Councillor McAlpine.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. I'm looking forward to introducing our draft version of the climate plan. So to get started, I know Chuck and Chris had already alluded to the importance of why we're talking about this today. But really, we're seeing the devastating impacts of climate change throughout our natural environments, our ecosystems, our community health and well-being, and also we're seeing significant economic costs associated with it. So it's an important time for the county to kind of take stock of what we're doing when it comes to climate action and create a roadmap to guide us forward. The county can really play an important role in reducing our own emissions and becoming more resilient as a corporation, while also supporting the community and helping them advance their different climate action efforts. So to develop this massive 80-page document, which I'm sorry I had to sift through, we worked through a number of really important steps. So the first phase was all about developing the Energy Conservation and Demand Management Plan, which Council approved back in July. And that plan is really focused on our corporate facilities and opportunities to create more energy efficient buildings and reduce our emissions. But that is just what that plan is focused on. So the Climate Action Plan is filling those gaps and continuing to bolster climate action moving forward. The second phase is really the research and data analysis. So you'll see a big section in the plan that looks to the different research that we did and how we tried to understand the impacts of climate change within the county and how we're impacting climate change as well, in terms of our emissions that we produce as a corporation, but also what we produce at a community level as well. We also had extensive conversations with staff across the organization. This plan is more corporate-wide in scale, and every division plays an important role in advancing climate action and adopting a climate lens in their work. And fourth, we had the opportunity to connect with our community and learn from the community. We had some great conversations with different community partners like Brant Waterways, Brant for Nature, our horticultural societies, and we also did a more fulsome public engagement session through Engage Brant, and did an online survey and some pop-up events at parks. So all of that information kind of comes together in the culmination of the Climate Action Plan and the draft version that you're seeing today. So the Climate Action Plan is intended to be a roadmap that's really focused on three broad goals. One is mitigation, so reducing our emissions, switching to cleaner sources of energy, and conserving energy. Two is adaptation, so how can we become more resilient, recognizing that the climate change impacts are here to stay. And three, how can we become more sustainable as a corporation to support our natural environment and ecosystems. So the actions in the plan are grouped into 7 categories and divided into short to long-term action timelines. And this is just the start of the work that needs to happen on climate action. It's intended to be more of a living document that's updated on an annual basis and reviewed, and at least updated every 5 years at minimum. In this sphere, technology is changing, our data collection is evolving, staff capacity is changing, financial capacity is changing, and so we need to make sure that this document can cope with all of these different changes. So in the interest of time, I won't go through all 50 action items, although I would love to. I'll just run through kind of an overview of the different categories and some of the objectives, targets, and actions underneath. So the first main focus is buildings and infrastructure. So if you look at the data on our emissions, you'll see that our corporate buildings and our residential and non-residential buildings represent a significant source of emissions. And so it's important for us to think about ways we can make them more efficient and sustainable, but also make them resilient to cope with the changing impacts. So, rising flood, heavier rainfall, more intense winds. We need to make sure that our buildings can cope with that. So you'll see some measurable targets on the screen there focused on our corporate facilities, and then some opportunities for us to take action through things like developing a new standard for our county buildings, and also looking at ways we can encourage the community to become greener and more sustainable and resilient as well. The second key category is transportation. So our corporate fleet, as well as getting around our county, really represents a significant source of emissions. So there's opportunities for us to become more sustainable on this front through different actions, such as optimizing our fleet, so determining what is needed when and the size of our fleet, and thinking about transitioning to EV and hybrid options, but also looking out into the community and thinking about ways we can encourage greener modes of travel there too. Nature-based solutions is really the third action area, and it was something we heard a lot from our community conversations. Really an emphasis on supporting our natural assets and continuing to grow our natural ecosystems because they are such valuable sources to offset our carbon emissions. So some really ambitious targets here for tree planting and growing our tree canopy in areas that are naturalized, and some ways that we can get there as a corporation and a community. And then waste is another key emission section. So the more waste that ends up in our landfill, the more emissions we're creating. So can we create some opportunities to reduce, prevent, and divert waste from ending up in our landfill through different means? And the fifth area is our economic development and tourism. So recognizing that manufacturing, agricultural, tourism, all of the different local businesses play a key role in creating our thriving community. So we need to ensure there's supports there to help them become more resilient and sustainable as well. County's making a lot of progress on safety and emergency preparedness, but there's always more we can do to make sure that our community is resilient to handle the new climate change hazards. So some opportunities for us to take action here. And then finally, really a significant section is the data outreach and education. So recognizing that the county can do a lot to educate staff across the organization, elected officials, and the community to create this kind of culture of climate change to help us continue to advance it across the organization. So all those action items, in terms of implementation, the plan does speak to some of the resources that we believe will be required to make this happen. So looking at additional staffing resources in terms of a climate action coordinator to help kind of take this plan and support implementation of the number of different action items. Also support from leadership, and then funding support as well through for some of the new projects that we're introducing. And in terms of next steps, so this is obviously a huge plan. It's 80 pages, 50 actions. A lot of actually focuses on the community side of things as well. So what we're proposing in terms of an approval process is to have some time for the community to digest this, review it, have time for council to digest it and review it, and provide feedback over the next coming weeks. And then the goal is to bring all of that feedback together to a report to council and to make any final tweaks to the plan and bring that forward by the end of the month. So that is it for me in terms of an overview of the plan. I know that's lots of information and happy to answer any questions that folks have.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Councilor Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, through you to Haley. Yeah, thanks for this report. A ton of information in there, like you say, 80 pages, 50 action items. That being said, the 50 action items broken down into the 7 categories. Did we prioritize the action items within the 7 different categories, or did we prioritize the action items overall?
What we did in terms of like when we were creating the implementation timeline and trying to decide kind of what goes when and when we should do things, we tried to take a really strategic approach. So for example, if you're looking in the buildings category specifically, the first action item there is all about developing a new building standard. And we really see that as the first step. And then from there, we can start to look at action item 2, which is about retrofitting our buildings to that new standard. So we try to be methodical and create kind of a timeline for implementation that aligns with what we can do, our capacity, as well as what makes sense in terms of like a logical implementation step. So within each different kind of subcategory, there's almost a prioritization of actions by short, medium, and long term to kind of guide us forward, if that makes sense.
It does. So there's no, of the 50 action items, there's no overall prioritization of those regardless of where they fall?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. And one more if you could, Mr. Chair. And with the themes themselves, are any of those, is there a prioritization on the 7 themes, or is it just we're kind of hitting them all at the same time, so to speak?
I think when it, through the chair to the councillor, I think when it comes to climate action, it really is kind of an all hands on deck approach. We need to take action across all of the categories, so it's difficult to prioritize one over the other. I think if we, are wanting to make decisions at a staff level and trying to prioritize pieces, we're probably going to look to the data to help us do that. So when we're looking at the emissions data, we're seeing, okay, buildings and transportation, those are our key sources. So if we do have to make difficult decisions and start to prioritize pieces, the categories, buildings and infrastructure, and the categories of transportation will likely be our top priority. But it really does require a comprehensive approach to make any headway in this sphere.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. A very comprehensive report. The thing that struck me straight away is we're kind of talking to ourselves, and it's very inwardly focused, almost by definition. Do you have any sense of how much of the emissions, the impact on the climate that we have in the county is due to the county activities and how much would be due to the wider community. And the reason I'm going down that line of conversation is, are we better off trying to improve our own performance, putting our focus there, or should we be leveraging our power, our authority, our ability to set bylaws and set zoning bylaws, for example, to influence the wider community to get a bigger result?
Through the chair to the councillor, I think that's a great point. So I think first thing first, I think it's important for the county to take a leadership role when it comes to climate action. So it's really tricky for us to start telling, private developers or even residential homeowners to do these things in their homes and spend this money when we as a county aren't doing those things. So I think there's value in us kind of taking corporate action when it comes to climate change to kind of lead the community forward. But when we do look at the emissions, we'll go into it's not on the screen anymore, but in the appendix of the report, there is a breakdown of what we're looking at in terms of corporate emissions and community emissions based on the data calculations that we did for this report. So we can see to make moves to get to net carbon neutral, the biggest bang for our buck is really helping the community advance their climate action. So there's things that we need to do as a corporation, I think, to set the tone. And then I think there's a lot more that we can do to support community action moving forward through this plan and through future iterations of this plan as well. Because to get to that carbon net neutral goal that we've set for ourselves by 2050, it's not enough for us to do things as a corporation. It's not enough for us to plant trees as a corporation. We need to support community action as well and help to encourage that.
Thank you. Thanks for that slide. That's really, if it could put the slide back up again. I mean, what that says to me is we can put all our energy in to corporate activity and we will save 1% of the emissions of the community. What would be the impact if we put that same resource into the community and leverage all the abilities that we have and authorities that we have? Well, my guess is we could get more from that line of activity. And I think that when you're asking for commentary on your draft, and I think we need to see some balance in the report that addresses how we decide on where to put resources on this subject. And I have a personal view that we should be trying to leverage our capability rather than being seen solely as the leader, although being a leader is important. Another question, if I may?
Really?
Yeah. Just when we're looking at corporate, do we incorporate the work and activities of BME?
This does not incorporate BMEs, no. When we're looking at corporate emissions, it hasn't been factored into that calculation.
But do we incorporate the benefits that BME has brought to the community through its activities in the field of renewable energy, for example?
Yes, through the chair to the councillor. So in terms of the offsetting value that you're seeing there, a lot of that is from our community canopy, but a lot of that is also BME's work in terms of generating renewable energy. So it's their work is showcased in that way in the offsetting value. But when we're thinking about corporate emissions, like our vehicles that we use at the county, our recreation facilities, fire halls, those types of things, BME's very small piece wasn't factored into that.
Okay. If I may at the right time, I've got an amendment I'd like to bring forward, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. First, we'll take a question from Councillor Kyle here.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you to Haley. I also think the report is great. It's really comprehensive. I'm just wondering a little bit about timing, and I can appreciate that staff's trying to get it wrapped up and back in front of us by the end of November. But one of the criticisms we are often getting from the community is that we don't engage with them. So I'm just wondering if 12 days for them to read and digest an 80-page report, whether we think that's enough or whether we should be pushing that a little bit longer. So just looking for some insight on the timing.
Through the chair to the councillor, Yeah, the goal of kind of providing this extra community engagement session or period was to allow the community to get their eyes on it and to digest it and to process it. So we do feel like because they've been involved so fulsomely throughout the development of the plan, we feel like that 10, 12-day period should be enough to let the really interested and impacted community members see it and provide feedback. Should council feel differently, we could definitely think about extending that or looking at a different timeline. But based on how much the community's been involved to this point, we feel like this kind of additional touch point, this review of the draft, can happen rather quickly.
All right, thank you. Councilor Miller.
A couple of questions, Chair, through to Haley. Haley, I'll kind of reiterate what I asked Adam earlier. Is that a fair criticism to say that this action plan focuses on actions and not maybe on preventing us from doing actions? And maybe I'm asking too much of the plan, but is that a fair statement though?
Through the chair to the councillor, I think that's a fair statement. I think if we're looking kind of at all of the different actions, a lot of them, are more action-oriented things that we can do. But if you dive into kind of the 7th section there on the data outreach and education, I think that's when we're really speaking about ways that we can create more of a culture shift at the County of Brant. So one of the action items is looking at, how can we encourage staff to think about the emissions that they're producing through different infrastructure projects or road reconstructions or things like that, and include that information in council reports so that you can see the impact that your decision's having on the emissions level, those types of things. So I think there's an opportunity through this plan to take action to actually change the corporate culture and to encourage that climate lens to be adopted more broadly. And I think that's something we can even explore strengthening as well within this plan, and as Adam mentioned, within the strategic plan as well.
Yeah, I seen in your report you talked about the education with different departments, but maybe the strat plan could complement it. Don't forget about planning, zoning bylaw. I mean, can have a big impact on emissions. Then the second question, I want to know what's your decision matrix for some of these action items, and I'll give you an example. I mean, volumes have been written about governments trying to implement good measures, and at the end of the day, they make it worse, right? So we got to be careful of that. And I'll just give you one example. You talk about reducing solid waste disposed in the landfill by 20%, right, by 2035. I mean, I could do that next week, right? I get a big diesel truck, and I go up and down every road and collect, their compost. But I think if we measure the amount of emissions, you'll probably find it goes up. So is there some mechanism where you run that through your emissions calculator and say, let's not do that action item because it's going to make it worse?
Through the chair to the councillor, I think that will be really part of the implementation of this plan. So this plan is higher level in nature. It's intended to be this kind of blueprint, this roadmap to carry us forward. But as we start to actually get down in the weeds and start implementing these action items, we're going to be having to have those conversations about what makes the most sense and doing some of that further analysis. This is our guidepost, our roadmap. And then as we start to do that implementation, there'll be further exploration in terms of what makes the most sense to reach our targets and goals, because those are the most important.
Just don't want to make it worse. So.
For sure, yeah.
Councillor Chambers and Councillor McAlpine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the slides toward the end had a couple of words that stuck out to me. One was, we're looking for resources. One of the words was funding. I think that maybe is one of the important words in the whole presentation, funding. If I was to say that there were no funds, how much of this plan could be implemented? And the second part of that question is, if funding was unlimited, how much of the plan could be implemented? Obviously, all of it. And again, keeping in mind that taxes are going up 10%, how does that impact the funding equation in terms of prioritizing all the good things that this plan proposes to do?
Through the chair to the councillor, obviously money helps, funding helps make things happen, but I think what we've done in this plan is we've tried to be reasonable and tried to lay out things in a way that makes sense in terms of prioritization and managing kind of the resources that are there. So I think, as you said, if we had all the funding in the world, this plan could be implemented very easily. With limited funding, it will be more challenging. There's requirements in terms of staff time to make this happen, working with external consultants to make this happen. So yes, I think this plan is a reasonable approach when it comes to climate action. I think we're being strategic in developing some of these plans and things to carry us forward, but obviously funding is an important piece of that puzzle.
And just a concluding comment, the funding comes from the people that are benefiting from this. And the mechanism is that the government takes their money and does it. It would be nice if we could encourage them to, the people that are funding it, to use their own money in their own way, plan to realize the climate change activities that we want. So we take their money, we regulate them, and then we have the benefit. And that's a government approach to something that all people should be doing anyway. But I really have a problem with taking people's money, regulating them in order to do that, and saying that we're doing what's good for you. It would be nice if we could encourage them to do it themselves with their own money, and we wouldn't have to do 10% increases in taxes and throw regulation upon regulations upon regulations upon them to ensure that they do that. And if they don't, they get in trouble. That's the two different approaches. And this plan, I think, relies on the government taking people's money and regulating them approach rather than to encourage people to do it themselves. Just a comment.
Councillor McAlpine.
I'm somewhat along the lines of what Robert was bringing up, but just a slightly different bent, where I appreciate, what you've done here with your program. One of the things that was kind of buried in there, which I think needs more emphasis, is the fact that there is upfront costs, but for instance, in building a new building, one of the points was it's an extra 2% cost increase in the building, but there's a payback over 7 years, and then over the 14 or the 30 years, 60 years life of that asset, there's huge paybacks that we can be looking at, and that can be reciprocated with the LED lights that we're putting in. Heat pumps now are a lot cheaper than using natural gas, and I think along with what you're saying, if we start bringing this information, knowledge that's just coming out now, that I think people will be happy to involve themselves in the process if they can see the end game is going to be benefiting. So yeah, so I just wanted to emphasize that we should be also emphasizing that in the future.
Through the chair to the councillor, yes, I think that's an important point, and something we've tried to weave throughout the plan is really that doing this work is intended to result in cost savings down the line. It makes us more resilient to cope with the changing climate, which is going to make sure we're not, spending thousands of dollars, millions of dollars fixing our buildings when they're impacted by climate change. And it also supports energy cost savings as well. So a good chunk of the plan is focused on educating the community and helping them learn about opportunities to incorporate energy efficiency upgrades at home, what that looks like. And also looking to ways to support them financially too for those that it might be out of reach if it's not an affordable option.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to add a couple of clauses to the resolution that we have in front of us. The first one being that staff be directed to prepare a decision package for the 2025 budget for a climate action specialist to lead the implementation of the climate action plan to ensure efficient and effective climate action is taken. The second clause, that the CAO of the County of Brant be directed to collaborate with BME Enterprises to investigate the feasibility of constructing solar canopies on municipally owned parking lots. I look for a second.
Mayor Bailey is your seconder.
Thank you.
You're welcome to motivate.
Sorry?
You're welcome to.
Yeah, so let me, just to take the first one, the need for resources. I think I heard Haley say resources are a challenge. I think if we can be confident that we are actually backing up a plan that we put forward with appropriate resources, I'd feel much more comfortable in believing that we could deliver it. Again, reflecting on the commentary from councillors Chambers and McAlpine, and to some extent the comments I made about shifting the balance between doing things for our own corporate benefit and doing things that will benefit the community when they take them up because they see that these are good things to do. So that I would like to see, and I think we need to understand at what cost delivering the plan will come with. And the second one, the solar canopies, I see regularly in the newspapers many communities around the world, not necessarily locally, who take the opportunity of trying to use the space that they have. We don't have a lot of space, a lot of land as a municipality, and we find that when we talk about affordable housing and do we have land for that? We don't. We do have car parks. We could utilize that space to be a generator of power that would help to balance off our net zero ambitions and also to generate some additional revenue for the county. And I think that's one of the roles that BME plays. And I wouldn't suggest that the county staff themselves do this, but we should leverage, again, leverage is the word, leverage BME's resources, and they'd be, I think, more than willing to investigate the possibilities.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this amendment? Councillor Miller.
Could we vote on the two amendments separately? Because I like the one but not the other.
Certainly. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, if we can vote on the amendment clauses separately. Calling the vote on the first.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, yep.
Could we just have them read prior to?
Oh, yes, for sure.
So the first amendment, and that staff be directed to prepare a decision package for the 2025 budget for climate action specialists to lead the implementation of the climate action plan to ensure efficient and effective climate action is taken.
All those in favor? All opposed? That is carried. And the second?
And the second one, and that the CAO of the County of Brant be directed to collaborate with BME Enterprises to investigate the feasibility of construction solar canopies on municipal-owned parking lots.
All those in favor? All opposed? And I believe that carries. Perfect. All right. And now back to the motion as amended. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? All opposed? That is carried. Alrighty. Moving on to 8.3, major projects dashboards. Haley.
Just stay up here for the rest of the night. Again, this report brings forward the second iteration of the major project dashboard for council. So this dashboard is intended to provide an update to council on major strategic projects that are happening across the county. Based on council's feedback on the first version that was brought in September 2024, we've added some additional projects to make this a more fulsome overview of all the things happening across the county. And also in alignment with council's feedback, we've started to explore ways to best share this information with the community, recognizing that that was of interest, and looking at ways to track and report on the status of major capital projects as well that have a little bit of a different focus than the strategic side of things. So as mentioned, this tool is intended to be designed iteratively. We want to improve it to meet the needs of council and staff. So if you do have any feedback on the design of the dashboard, the information displayed, I'd appreciate if you could direct that to myself. And if you do have any feedback or questions about the specific projects that are listed, the best person to contact is the staff contact listed. They'll have more information. But just wanted to give that quick little overview, and thanks council for your feedback on the first version, and we look forward to continuing to improve this tool moving forward.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Pierce, then Councillor House.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, through you. Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I liked it when I saw it, and I appreciate the fact that it's not only going to be available to us, but it's going to be available to the public. That's the key. And my only other thing is one of the suggestions was that we add more than just the major projects. I appreciate that, because what might be major to us or to you, there might be smaller ones that are major to the public. So I think it's important that we have, obviously we can't report on everything that's being done. It's just too much, and I appreciate that. But as much information as we can get out there is the better, and I appreciate that. So thank you for this. I think it's going to answer a lot of questions, I think, which is good. Now, part B of that, if I could. My only, and it's not a concern, but I'm wondering, and I don't want, major staff time taken to do it, but I wish we could have more than quarterly updates. Now, I understand it can't be weekly because things don't move that quickly on some of these major projects and stuff like that, but if there's any way, either A, to have more than quarterly updates, or B, if there's a significant change in a project, that it's highlighted in some form on there. If there's, like, we got in our emails today, we got constructions across the county that have been delayed, stuff like that. That's the information that the public needs to see, and things like that. If it's, maybe it's a different color, or it's highlighted, or a caution sign or something within the different fields that are there to say, there's a change in this, there's a major change in that. I think that would really boost the goodness of this report, because I think it is a good news report. Thank you.
I believe CAO Newton wishes to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for that feedback. Yeah, I think this is going to have to be something that staff continually evaluate on both fronts. One being the projects that are included. I agree, obviously not everything. I think that'll just dilute the advocacy of the whole thing to have everything. It just can't happen. However, the important projects are the ones that should be included is somewhat subjective also. So that's why I think staff would appreciate feedback if there's something that's not there that you feel it should be, for whatever reason. Maybe it wasn't deemed a major project. Let us know. It might just be that it's generating a lot of public feedback or interest, and then we can look to get it included. And again, with how often this is updated, my initial ask was every month, and I think that was not that well received by
I like that.
by everybody. But again, I don't want to overwhelm people. So again, it's a bit of that balance again of what's realistic to get updated, and how many projects do we keep in there. Keeping that in a reasonable threshold, I think, is going to help staff be able to keep up with all the updates. And certainly if we can get it to a more frequent basis than quarterly, then we'll work on that.
Mr. Chair, if I could just respond to that, and I appreciate that. And as I say, I think maybe having there's been a significant change in this particular project, that might help, because if there's a project in there, say it goes from May to December, people are going to understand it goes from May to December. But all of a sudden, if we're October and all of a sudden it's been pushed out, that's the information that needs to be out there. So thank you.
Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Haley. I agree with everything Councillor Pierce said, which doesn't always happen. But I would like to reinforce the need, and as Councillor Pierce mentioned, our definition of major projects is not necessarily the same as the public's definition. And I'm going to repeat a request that I brought forward a few months ago, and as we translate this into a public facing opportunity, I believe that all of the public are keenly interested in how projects line up and how they're going to impact their daily lives, and especially when it comes to road construction, right? We've got the downtown dig on here, but we don't have, unless I missed it, we don't have roundabouts at the north end of Paris, as just an example. In the eyes of the public, that would be considered a major project. And how those, that's just two examples, how those two things line up and how it's going to impact how people move around this community are critical to the people who will look at the social media version of this or the website version of this. And so I strongly urge and encourage whatever efforts we can put forward to deliver that to the public in an appropriate way.
Through the chair to the counselor, again, lots of great points when it comes to informing the community. I think for this particular tool, when we're thinking about it being kind of this dashboard for council, the intention is, yes, to focus more on, maybe major is the wrong word, but those kind of larger strategic projects that have a scope beyond maybe a neighborhood level scope. So it's going to impact maybe the corporation at large or the community at large. So I think maybe we can tweak kind of what types of projects show up on this kind of major dashboard, or maybe even update the name. But I think that you're right, not everybody's major projects, they don't all align. But on that front, I think too, we can look at other tools and other ways to keep the community informed when it comes to these types of projects. I think, again, this dashboard's maybe really helpful for council, but maybe the community doesn't want to see a big Excel spreadsheet of everything's happening. So there's definitely opportunities for us to work with staff across the organization, with the communications and marketing team, to think about what the best way to share that information is. I know we have lots of great pages on our website that do provide construction updates, but maybe it's even about making that more top of mind for the community. So lots of great things for us to explore.
Could I follow up just one more
certainly.
thing through the chair? Thank you for that, and thank you for all of this. I believe that if there, I'm a visual-minded person, so if the public had access to a simplified Gantt chart where they could click on, the Gantt chart shows that the downtown dig starts in March of 2025, and the roundabouts at the north end of Grand River Street North are going to be whenever. And if they could see how they don't exactly line up, fortunately, but then if they could click on the simplified Gantt chart and then get in to the details that are found within the dashboard or the spreadsheets, I think that would be something people could digest fairly easily. So just a suggestion.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councilor Miller.
Just building on what Councilor Pierce said earlier, I like the idea of updating it when there's a change. And obviously, if there's no change, you don't have to update it. But I'll just give you one example. It talks about Scotland and Oakland Masters Environmental Servicing Plan. It says prepare final reports and public meeting presentation material for a public meeting in late November. Well, that date is set, and if it was there, it would be more helpful to the public. So just adding my 2 cents on that one.
Thank you very much. Any further comments, questions? Seeing none, I realize I didn't grab a mover and seconder. Can I get a mover? Mayor Bailey, Councilor Pierce. All those in favor? All opposed? That is carried. All right, now we will move on to 8.4, review of corporate data collection. Haley.
Last one, I promise. So before we launch into questions and comments about this report, I did just want to give a quick overview about the type of information that's included there. So this whole report is really underpinned by this kind of idea that data is really an important asset for municipalities. It helps us make decisions, measure our progress, and evaluate our programs and services. So it's incredibly important. So currently, one piece of our corporate data collection program is the collection and reporting on the ISO 37120 data series that we do through the World Council of City Data. So back in November of 2023, which would have been a year ago already, Council directed staff to explore if we should add 2 new data series through WCCD, so ISO 37122 and ISO 37123. So staff looked to investigate this question, and while we were investigating this, we wanted to ask some broader questions about how we use data as a corporation and how we continue to improve that moving forward. So this report looks to answer kind of the question of the WCCD data: do we expand, do we not? And also look at, how are we using data across the corporation and what can we do to improve it? So on the first question, based on staff review, at this time, we're recommending that we stick with the ISO 37120 series and don't expand our reporting to the ISO 123 and 122. And the rationale behind this is we can do a lot more with the existing data that we have before we start to expand the program. So I think as a corporate strategy team, we're looking for ways to incorporate this ISO 37120 data within our work and ways we can expand its use across the organization. So rather than pursuing expansion, let's focus on using what we have right now to its full capacity. We also recognize that this is an extreme cost. It's roughly $25,000 to $50,000 USD to add these new data series through WCCD. So when we're thinking about all the pressures that we're feeling, that's one thing to consider. And then we also wanted to recognize that through conversations with staff, reporting on this existing data series is a considerable amount of work. So adding 2 new data series will just put additional pressure on staff. So that's why we made the recommendation that we did when it comes to the data series with WCCD. And then in terms of our broader data program, what we found through conversations with staff and through our research is that we have a lot of great data internally, and it's really decentralized across the county. So certain divisions have the information they need to make their decisions, but that information isn't necessarily. There's an opportunity for us moving forward to look at ways that we can encourage that information to be shared across the organization and reduce some of those silos. We can continue to explore ways to help staff leverage data and use data throughout their work through things like data literacy support, helping them with visualization tools like Gantt charts and all those important things to convey data. And we can also look to leverage all of the smart technologies that we're incorporating and using the data that we're collecting through those tools to make smart, informed decisions moving forward. So overall, a lot of information in the report about where we're at in terms of our data use and where we want to go. But if anybody has any questions on those recommendations, happy to answer those.
Thank you. Can I get a mover and seconder first of all? Councillor Bell, Councillor McAlpine, any questions to the report? Seeing, Councillor Chambers.
Just to comment that I think this is an excellent report, and the corporate strategy team is doing excellent work, and I would like to congratulate the corporate strategy team, but I'm just not exactly sure who they all are. I would just wonder if you could just introduce the corporate strategy team that we're talking about.
Sure. It's a small but mighty team. Adam, myself, and then Delia is also on our team.
It's an excellent team.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Any further comments, questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? That is carried. All right, we will move on to communications, of which we have none. CAO's update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bear with me. I have a number of updates. The county's annual emergency exercise was held on October 24th, and while Chief Watson is still here, I wanted to thank him as well as our county risk coordinator, Kent Potroff. They did an amazing job. It was a multi-day flood event, which is something that is a high risk for the county. And so much work and planning goes into those days. So thank you very much to you and to Kent. It was great, and I think it was a good learning experience for us and our emergency preparedness moving forward. Councillor Pierce was able to join and observe at least a little bit that day, and I hope you agree with everything I just said. Mobilization of phase 1 for the Brantford Paramedics new headquarters is scheduled for November 11th. Detailed design of the North Paris Fire Station is underway. Staff are working on the RFP for pre-qualification of contractors. That'll be released this fall, and the construction tender is planned to be released in Q1 of 2025. The inaugural meeting of the County of Brant OPP Detachment Board was held last month. Enforcement Services is busy doing training for their new software hotspot, which will support the administrative penalty system. And graduation and long service ceremony for the fire service is being planned before year end. The Paramedic Services Winter Wonderland Toy Drive is this Saturday, November 9th from 11 to 2 at the Canesville Paramedic Station. The event is being supported by Brant OPP, County of Brant Fire, Brantford Fire, Brantford Police, and the Salvation Army. New development charges are now in effect. The procurement education session, which council had requested, is being scheduled on December 3rd. I believe Heather Boyd has reached out to council. If you have any questions or specific topics you would like covered, she can make sure they're incorporated. The long-term financial plan is going to be coming back also next month in advance of 2025 budget deliberations. The ward boundary review results will be presented next 2 weeks at Admin and Ops, and the recorded voting software will be implemented by year end. The market compensation review will also be presented in 2 weeks at Administration and Operations ahead of budget. The official plan is now approved. I think you've all seen that, and the next steps will be forthcoming in a report on how those will be blended with the provincial policy statement, which came into effect October 20th. Brandon Courtlive has been hired as manager of policy planning. I think you all know Brandon. He started this week. So congratulations to him, and recruitment is ongoing for the other staff vacancies. The Downtown Paris zoning amendment is also going to be starting to bring the zoning in alignment with the visions of the downtown master plan. Public information meeting is scheduled for November 27th. There's 2 sessions that day. Recreation Services team hosted the annual Halloween walk at Synlapse. 127 trick-or-treaters attended this event. Forest Drive Park Paris, the playground updates are complete, opening today. Burford Skate Park is nearing completion to be open November 11th. Drury Street Park playground updates nearing completion to reopen also next week. And Holiday Lights in the Park at Paris Lions Park on Friday, November 29th from 6 to 8 p.m. Hopefully you all can be there. And the Winter Community Services Guide will be released December 19th, 2024. Paris Skate Park expansion, construction is expected to commence next week, take approximately 6 weeks. Tutela Heights water disconnection for city residents is progressing and will be completed by mid-December. The city may expedite this schedule, and the project's going well. Joint household hazardous waste days with Brantford happened in October, and another one November 16th. The paving, I can't believe Councillor Coleman isn't here to hear this, but the paving of Birch Road and Maple Grove intersection is to start next week and will be completed by November 15th. Work on McLean Bridge and Cornell Culverts is progressing well and be completed before winter. Darnley Bridge will be completed mid-December. And working on revised schedule for West River Street due to utility conflicts. There'll be a Friday file coming out this week on that. And also operations will do a Friday file on all the construction projects to update their status prior to the winter construction slowdown. That is my update, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from committee? Councillor Pierce.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Through you, a comment, if I could, in regards to the emergency management exercise. I was very happy to have attended that day. It was, again, as the CAO said there, I kind of hopped between tables. There was, different areas, and I was able to hop between tables and talk to a lot of people from each table. And the thing that struck me was the fact that the communication that was happening between the different groups was fantastic. And it wasn't just one person from one group talking to another. Everybody was talking, everybody was working through. And, I thought it was it was very, very well done by all the staff there, and I thank everybody that was involved with that. It was a good day. Hopefully, we never have to put that into work. What was being exercised in that day, but it really opens your eyes as to what could happen, especially when we have Two Rivers here and all the stars align that everything hit our small town of Paris here all at the same time. So it was a great day, and I think it's well deserved thanks to all those that were involved, and to Kent. I know he did a lot of work in planning this thing. I think sometimes he kind of sits there and plans it like this and kind of likes it, but no, he did a very good job, and he threw a little wrench in here and threw a little wrench in there, and it was good the way the day progressed, and everybody did a fantastic job. Right at the end of the day, to the staff at the BSC that was there, and that was one of the evacuation points there, and we were advised to go in there and just kind of we were acting as folks that were evacuated, and gave them a little bit of a hard time, and not wanting to give information, and they handled it very well, and I thought it was a job well done by all. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pierce. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Chambers.
Just along that same line, and I wish I could have attended as well. I'm just concerned about one aspect of emergency planning, and that is something that hasn't been, that wasn't put in place, and that's a lot of misguided people will call their counselors if there's an emergency going on, and it's important that the counselors all respond with with the same message, because you don't want, and a lot of times the counselors don't have a clue what's going on. So if that happens, what is a counselor supposed to do? What part of the preparation do the counselors need to have? Because if there is an emergency and somebody calls me, I don't want to look like an idiot, but I don't want to cause problems, and I just don't know who to tell them to call.
For sure,
Sure,
Councillor Pierce.
we'll help you try and not look like an idiot, Councillor Chambers. One of the decision points on there was the fact of our communication staff engaged the mayor and engaged the councillors. So as part of the plan, there is a call out to all councillors with this is what's happening, this is what we're doing, that type of thing. So absolutely, as I felt, from a councillor point of view, I thought that we would be, we were well looked after in that sense, that to absolutely give us the information to give out, because we want to make sure everybody's given the same message, right? And that was the purpose of that.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions? CEO Allison.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for that. And I will add, during the exercise itself, I actually do call Mayor Bailey, and we walk through whether he wants to declare an emergency, that sort of thing. And the information officer actually even drafts communication that would go to council and go out to the public. That's actually physically done. We don't send it out because we don't want to cause undue panic in the, if somebody doesn't actually understand that it is an exercise going on. So we do go through those steps. So in the event of a real emergency, we are prepared of how that would get distributed to all of council.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, can I get a mover and seconder, or what usually we like to do with the report? Sorry, I should say. Receive it. Perfect. Councillor Pierce. Mayor Bailey. All those in favor? All opposed? That is carried. Moving on to other business. Do we have any other business for the benefit of the committee? Seeing none, we will move into in camera for personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees, staffing priorities for the 2025 budget, and a meeting held for the purpose of educating or training members, encampment procedure education session. Can I get a mover and seconder? Mayor Bailey, Councillor Miller, all those in favor? And that All right, perfect. Our next item on the agenda is next meeting and adjournment. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Councilor Pierce, we are adjourned.